Right. Ah. There we are. Hello.
Good morning, Thomas.
Morning.
How are you?
Hello. I'm fine. Yeah, very well.
All of the time things told me that this was starting at 7:30, and I guess they had it wrong because of daylight savings time or something. I don't know.
Well, it starts at 2:30 French time, so that's in 5 minutes, I think. When I looked it up, that's what it said. 6 p.m. Delhi.
Yeah, when I looked it up, it said 7:30 a.m. New York, and I think the machines didn't take into consideration daylight savings time.
Must be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. So it's early morning for you, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just left it on and at 7:30 an hour ago here, so
well.
I figured that must have been what happened.
Yeah. Anyway, now we're here, so that's the important
good.
thing. And there's Sean. Hello, Sean.
Hi, John.
Yeah. And yeah. So timing wise, I think we're okay. I hope other people didn't come earlier. Sean, you knew it was 2:30, right? 1:30 Irish time.
No, I thought it was 12. Last month, I thought it was 1:30, but this month I thought it was 12:30. So I checked at 12:30. GMT.
Right. It's confusing. I think what I'm going to do in future is I'm going to, instead of saying 6 p.m. Delhi time, I'm going to say, the French time. And then people can work it out from there more easily.
Yes.
Because it's always complicated.
This is the first time I had trouble with it, actually. And I think it's because of the daylight savings time in New York.
Yeah, that's, here.
Do you have that, Sean?
We do, yeah, we have.
That's what did it then, I think, yeah.
Confusing.
Yeah.
So I think maybe my friend in Israel, Gila, tried to join earlier too. She might have gone off. But I hope a few hardy folk come and join us. We're waiting for Gavork really as well from Armenia. I've got some news to report on that, so we can we'll go round in a minute. How are you, Sean? Have you had a good Christmas? Happy Christmas.
Yes, not too bad though at all. We're escaping from this virus. We're lucky enough.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you saw recently, the 30-year papers have been released. These government papers hold for 30 years. Have you been following that in the last day or two?
No, Thomas? I haven't. No. What have you discovered?
Well, there's some good, interesting stuff about the peace process in Northern Ireland and the relationships between the different leaders, between Bertie Ahern and it was John Major and Albert Rennie, just what the background that was kind of kept secret. Well, it wasn't what they were saying behind closed doors. It's always interesting to hear that.
Sure.
In relation to the build up to the Good Friday Agreement. And, and be a lot more on the English, or the broader international secrets, or not so much secrets, but just things that people, the governments don't want in public while they're debating things.
Yes. Well, that's interesting. Are they online? Are they online, these things?
Yes, they are, because the media have access to, the reporters have access to them now. With the 30-year rule, they're open access.
Right.
I just, from a peace point of view, I think one of the interesting things that come out on those papers, and not just those papers, is that the importance of the relationships, personal relationships between the leaders. If they don't get on personally, if there's a personal animosity, not animosity, but if they just physically don't like each other or something, That's
Right.
not a good, even though you have teams of bureaucrats and administrators behind the leaders, but if the individuals don't, it's much better for a peace process if the individuals are reasonably correlated from a personal point of view.
Yeah.
And with Bertie Ahern, who was the Irish, and Tony Blair, they were very much, because of their personalities, they pushed the peace process at a crucial time, which if it had been someone like Margaret Thatcher or even John Major on the British side or a different one on the Irish side, the push mightn't have come. So, I mean, it's just from other peace processes, I'm not sure how important it is, the individual, or how much work has been done on that in various peace or research centres.
It's a good point. Yeah, the individual role. And I think, I mean, to me, the diplomacy of Brexit is down to the stupidity of Boris Johnson and his non-existent diplomacy with the French. I mean, we have terrible relations with the French now.
Yeah,
and it's down to this man Boris Johnson inability to make any, like he breaks all the rules of conventional diplomacy because he has no training. Hello, Rena. Greetings.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry,
Yeah, welcome.
I was surprised. I thought it was cancelled. Let me second. I have to disconnect with something else. And
Okay, sure.
yeah, no, that's fine. Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome. And are you in California? Where are you joining us from?
Yes,
California.
I'm in California, and it's really early in the morning here, so
Okay.
I'm a bit sleepy.
Okay, you get the prize.
Oh.
You get the prize. Yeah, well, we're all joining at different times here.
yeah.
And can I ask Priscilla, since you're an American in New York, well, what would you like to comment about Donald Trump's diplomatic style versus his personality? Was he a good diplomat, you think?
I'd like to not mention his name.
Right.
I'd like to not give him and one more minute of airtime.
Sure. Well, I think, I mean, it's strangely, my friend in Israel, who's the coordinator for my institute in Israel, in the Israeli media, they love Donald Trump. Maybe Rena can confirm this.
Really?
You have links to Israel, don't you? Because he recognized the capital in Jerusalem and, etc. So it depends on where you're looking at from. I mean, the Israelis, a lot of them love Trump. Is that true, Rena? What do you think?
I'm not sure about your comment about the media. I see where it comes from. Maybe certain voices in the media, but I think the majority of the media not really supported. It's true that a lot of Israeli did support Trump and the Republican. Now, it's not only reconciliation of Jerusalem, but his opinion toward Iran and the Iran agreement and what's going on with the tension over there. That's what makes Israeli very suspicious with regard to Democrats or but don't understand me.
No, I mean, I've heard.
I am Democrat and I'm very progressive with my opinion. But I do respect the Republican. I do respect their leaders. There are different voice and I'm just trying to understand where is it coming from.
Well, our job as the World Intellectual Forum, this is a safe space for sharing your ideas. And, nobody has an absolute monopoly of truth. We're all beginners when it comes to absolute truth. And except we're Hegelians, then we might be, ahead of the game. Sorry, that was a joke. I've had a friend here as a workaway who comes from Stuttgart, which is where Hegel came from. And he's a philosopher I've always studied in depth. He reckoned we humans can find absolute truth, but it's very complicated. You have to read Hegel's volumes. They're really like a full-time job to even begin to understand it. But I was part of a conference the other day with the Galileo Commission, which is a new commission set up to study the role of consciousness and science. So these are people that are studying latest physics, quantum physics, all that, but putting consciousness back into the equations. And they've come to the view that actually the old 19th century materialist physics is outmoded, and that consciousness is part of reality. It's not just a sort of byproduct of a few atoms in the brain. It's part of the fabric of water, fire, earth, air, atmosphere, and so on and so on, which is kind of what Hegel said. And there's a professor of religious studies in America called Glenn McGee, who's written a book called The Hermetic Hegel, a study of Hegel and esotericism. If you haven't come across this book, I strongly recommend it. And he discovered that Hegel was the master of all the esoteric traditions, the Hermetic traditions, the Gnostic traditions, esoteric Christianity, and the Kabbalah. He knew a lot about Jewish mysticism, which he kept. He didn't put all that in the footnotes of his works. He dressed up his works like traditional philosophy, but actually it was coming from years of study of esoteric thought, which is very interesting, I think. And I'm the same. I'm a philosopher, but I've studied all these comparative esoteric traditions. And I've come to the same view that Hegel had, that they are ultimately saying the same thing. You know, this is why I'm frustrated. And I would love it if the great esoteric teachers and philosophers of the planet could come together in peace, whether you're Israeli, Palestinian, Iranian, American, British, you know, whatever, Russian, because we all have so much in common, you know. Instead of what's happened is the warlords have taken power. The intellectuals have been pushed out of power in every country, apart from maybe, I don't know, the Vatican, I don't discuss. The warlords have taken power and they control the armies, which then unleash hell and murder on ordinary people. So the question we can discuss today, one of the things on the agenda, is how can the intellectuals, like, what can we do about that? We sit back hopelessly as wars continue, you know. And then we even when we made a peace treaty, like in Ireland and Britain, we had this Good Friday Agreement. Now the warlords are trying to tear it up. They're trying to leave the EU. They're trying to destroy 30 years of peacemaking. Which is, so anyway, that's my little opening rant. But look, let's go around and introduce ourselves. So you know me, I'm Thomas Daffin. I'm coordinator for this World Intellectual Forum, based in Europe, but it's a global project. And I've been doing these monthly Zoom things on the 30th since God knows how long during this lockdown for the last year. This is the last one this year. It's always random who comes. It's an informal discussion for educational purposes. And given the time zone differences, you know, different people come on at different times. We'll see what happens. But, you know, nice, welcome. We'll just go around and introduce ourselves to start with, and that'll be fun. Sean, why don't you go next? You're
Thanks, Thomas. My name is Sean English, for people who don't know, and I've been working on and off with Thomas over the years in the area of peace studies, peace research. And I'm based here in Ireland. So we have a long history of a peace process. And I mean, Thomas has come over a few times and taught in some of the courses I had organized, and we have set up a few commissions. So we've been working together on a lot of areas, not just related to Ireland. So that's kind of my background. And I have visited Thomas both in Scotland a few years ago, because we had a PhD student that needed some advice. So we went up to the centre in Scotland, in a lovely castle there. And then I've been down to France to the new centre there, in the center of France. So I'm hoping that most people will visit at some stage. It's a very historic area, that part of France you're in, Thomas. And then all the resources in your center as well. Amazing. So sorry, yeah, that's my introduction. So hello, everyone.
Right. Yeah. Welcome, Sean. Greetings. Rena, why don't you go next?
Yes, hi. By the way, the meeting is starting. What time the meeting starts?
Well, it was
Around-
starting 20 minutes ago, but we'll go for it now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just yeah, because I was here 4:30, and I apologize for being late. I thought it was cancelled, and I was engaged with
Oh, no.
another stuff. So yeah, I was born in Israel. I came to the state about 20 years ago to pursue a postdoctorate in science in immunology. My background is immunology. I worked as a bench scientist almost 9 years at Stanford in microbiology and virology. Studied different families of viruses and common pathways that different viruses utilize the cells in order to find a single drug to block a different type of viruses. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful concept, and I mentioned this in detail because it sits exactly on my core value of interconnectivity. That we all coexist here together. It looks like we are separate species, but we really are very, very well connected, not only by the air that we breathe. And this brings me to another topic that I'm involved with. I love philosophy. I always learn philosophy in my studies, PhD, and later on. Always you mentioned consciousness. So I don't know if you are familiar with the map of consciousness of David, Dr. David Hawkins.
No, I don't know that. No, I haven't
You
seen
don't
it.
know that? Oh,
No,
wow.
it looks amazing.
He is amazing. He passed away a few years ago, but he's a spiritual teacher, enlightened person that spoke about awareness, and he also mapped the awareness, and he was
How do you
psychiatric.
spell his name? How do you spell his name?
I will, you know what? I will
Put it in chat, his name.
I will in chat. Yes, I will Google. I will put it in chat. Hawkins. So yeah. In any case, I also believe in totality and Hegel, and that we are speaking the same voice here, same vibes. So I met Thomas in the Peace Congress during October, because I was there to present the maps, the Marine Arctic Peace Sanctuary. So beside of being a consultant scientist, I volunteer in the organization named Parvati Foundation. And this organization is leading the creation of the Marine Arctic Peace Sanctuary. So we work to raise awareness of what's going on in the Arctic, the devastating situation of the ice and all the consequences that driven from this, the melting ice and the army militarization that is coming to this area. And that's actually how we connected with Thomas, and he invited us to talk. And I hope that maybe next time we will present here, like a slide presentation, something that we give.
Okay, but we'll go around again after we've done the introductions.
Yeah, I'm sorry if my introduction was too long.
No. I know it's the tip of the iceberg, and you've done a lot. I mean, all of us have done years of research, and that's just this one lifetime. So another time we'll introduce all our former lives. That'll be fun. Thank you, Rena. No, that was great. Priscilla, your turn. Go for it.
Yes, hi, I'm Priscilla Frutzman. I'm located just north of New York City. One of the things we've started doing is identifying the Native American groups that were here before we were here. So this is like Muncie and Lenape land. So this is something we've started doing in our restorative practice work. I'm doing a lot on restorative practice. Just only a couple of weeks ago, for the first time in 2 years, went back to our school in Queens for our peer mediation training. It felt so strange to be teaching with masks on, but we did it, and we don't know what's happening as the spread in New York of the new virus is just crazy. And I just heard on the news this morning that every second 2 Americans are found to have the virus. Every second. It's like shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so even though nobody's or most people are not dying from it, so we're grateful for that. I'm so happy to be here at this meeting. Actually, I always learn so much from everybody, and as Thomas said, we never know who's going to show up, and it's always very, very interesting, and I just love it. I learned so much, and thank you. I primarily do education work, peer mediation, restorative practices, conflict resolution, and I have a particular interest in bias, what we used to call bias awareness. And we're now in the process of renaming it, because in the field, anti-bias is used as a term now, and anti-racism. And I personally feel that I don't like using the word anti-anything. So we're trying to come up with more positive language, inclusive language, so diversity and inclusiveness. And we're trying to decide whether or not we should be having courses that deal with racism only for white people first, and then only for people of color, and then bringing people together. I'm totally used to the idea of having everybody welcome and everybody together, so we're kind of exploring that. I've also been doing a lot of reading lately on high conflict. Peter Coleman from Columbia University has written a new book on polarization. And Amanda, I'm forgetting her last name, has a book called High Conflict, and very, very interesting, because that's another thing I'm very interested in, getting together restorative circles to deal with controversial issues and to hear what people are thinking, and how to bring people together in that way. So we were started by the Quakers, actually, and then we moved up to Nyack, New York, with the Fellowship of Reconciliation, and now we're a separate nonprofit. So that's a little bit about me.
And when you say we, you're talking about creative responses to conflict, right?
Yes, creative response to conflict was started by the Quakers in New York City, and then we moved out of the city to the Rockland County suburb of Nyack. Where the Fellowship of Reconciliation was until fairly recently, and they've now moved out of Nyack as well.
Right. Okay. Well, no, Priscilla, and we met in India several times, actually.
Yes.
Thanks to Dr. Gandhi.
Yes.
I think, Sean, you've met Dr. S.L. Gandhi as well, haven't you? He's our coordinator for India. He's an older man of 85. He doesn't often come to our meetings, sadly. He came to one of them recently. But he's organized this epic series of conferences underwritten by the Jain community in India on nonviolence. And that's how Priscilla and I have met. We kept bumping into each other, and then decided it was destiny, so we ought to work together. Instead of like every 3 years in India,
Right.
And Priscilla's organized this fantastic International Restorative Council, which meets every month. I go when I can. It's really good. Sort of part training for the trainers, I suppose you could call it, and discussing a lot of issues that maybe we'll go into during the course of this meeting. Right. So, okay. So, well, we'll go around again, only we'll have a bit longer this time to unfold a particular theme. I've got, I don't know, 5 sort of themes on my mind, or we could take a theme and go round on it. I think maybe that's the way to organize the meeting. So I want since we've got a virologist of sorts with us, let's do our first thing on the virus issue and the pandemic, because she might be able to answer some questions we have. So like the rest of the world, you know, I'm in shock still that this thing happened. I mean, none of us expected it. We didn't foresee it, I don't think. I suppose it's been one's worst nightmare, something like this. But so I've set up, under the Institute, which is co-sponsoring this series of meetings, I've set up this international commission of inquiry into the etiology of the virus. I'm not going to talk at the moment about, you know, how we treat it. There are different ways, and the efficacy of the vaccine, you know, why some work and some don't better. And, you know, we could talk about that. Maybe Rena has views on that. But what I'm interested in, first of all, because I used to work in the history of medicine. I've taught classes at the University of Oxford on religious studies and medicine. Did a pioneering course at Oxford on, like, say, you know, Islamic medical traditions, or Jewish or Christian or Buddhist or Hindu. And I'm really interested in what we mean by medicine and the philosophy of medicine. And it seems to me the philosophy of medicine is relevant now at this time on the planet. And I'm mindful there's a kind of civil war in the medical profession over the origin of this vaccine or how to treat it, which is a very disturbing thing to be living through, you know. But I think my first question is simply, what's the cause of this vaccine? And how can we know that, right? How can we know with certainty? And what is knowledge? It seems to me we're living in a post, you know, we've entered this, they call it a post-truth world. You know, we can't know. It's like that knowledge is denied to us. My question is, does anybody actually know what caused this vaccine? If this vaccine was human engineered, and there is some evidence that it was, as a sort of bioengineered gain of function thing, then somebody must know they've done that research, but they're not telling, you know. Somebody funded it. Somebody, you know, I mean, you know, there is speculation this was done in China, but funded by America. And if so, if that's true, then I think we're living in an existential nightmare. We're living in a sort of a self-inflicted suicidal binge in which certain elites have created something that's now devastating humanity. So that's one hypothesis. It's just a hypothesis. Another hypothesis is this was a totally natural occurrence, and it was just it was something happening in a cave, in caves in Wuhan. Sorry, not in Wuhan, in China, but about 1,000 kilometers from Wuhan. What's strange about it is that theory, the caves are actually a long, long way from Wuhan, but somehow the bats, the virus that you know migrated from bats, got into a meat market in Wuhan, you know, and then reached into the human population. And we were told that in the beginning, that was the argument, but it doesn't actually add up. But it's a hypothesis, right? And there are, you know, a couple of other hypotheses. And as you know, when the World Health Organization went in to try and establish what was the truth, they weren't given all the data. They weren't told. So there's a problem. You know, we're living in this a state of not knowing. We can call it an epistemological void, you know. And I find that really comfortable. We humans like to know things. Certainly I do as a philosopher. I've written a whole book called Being and Knowledge. I put my life on the line for being and knowledge. Now we're in the middle of a not knowing episode, which is causing death and panic, anxiety. I've got a friend here, work away from New Zealand, who can't go home to New Zealand. She's not allowed because the country's in lockdown. And there are millions of cases like that. So I think our first duty as the World Intellectual Forum is to push on this and ask the politicians of the world to get their act together and tell us what really is going on here. Anyway, there we are. That's my little opening statement about that. Let's go round on the vaccine. Rena, you want to go next? You're the expert.
Yeah. So there is someone else that join us. Welcome, Galaxy SA.
Yeah, I think this is Gila from Herzliya in Israel. Gila, can you
That's
hear us?
right, it's me, yes.
Hi,
Yeah,
shalom, Gila. This
Hi.
is cool.
Shalom, yeah.
Shalom.
Yeah, welcome.
This is nice. Welcome.
Yeah, Gila is our coordinator for Israel. She's an amazing woman, an expert in philosophy, and particularly the Kabbalah is her thing.
Thank
Oh,
you very much, Thomas.
wow.
Do introduce yourself, Gila. We've already done our introductions, but you
Any
say your
chance-
thing.
I tried to connect, but there was no connection. I don't know why.
No, we're fine. We can hear you fine. So do just introduce yourself to the meeting, and we'll be pleased to. We're discussing the virus to the first topic, and then we'll go on to other
I
topics.
see. Okay. Well, I've been working with Thomas for the last 20 years in several subjects. I'm interested in Kabbalah, as Thomas said. I was part of a very powerful meditation group that was guided by Menorah Charney, and we did there a great work. Basically, I'm sort of a spiritual teacher, I would say. This is my subject in many fields.
Yeah. And she lives 2 minutes from the beach in Herzliya.
Oh, wow.
They're my favorite waves in the world at sunset. A most magnificent place. So thank you for joining us, Gila. Welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. And Gila's a graduate of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, which is where
That's right.
I've studied there. And they have the library of Gershom Sholem, the great historian of the Kabbalah, who's one of my heroes.
Yes, that's right.
So welcome. Yeah. Okay, Rena, back to you and the vaccine. What's your take on the etiology?
Yes, one second, if I may say, Gila, I'm Israeli, as you may realize from my accent.
Where are you from?
I was born in Givat Olga. It's a neighborhood near Hadera.
Okay.
It's in the center, between
Tel
Aviv.
Yes.
Tel Aviv
Okay.
and Haifa, and then later on, my parents moved to Netanya, and so.
Also a beautiful city, the same beach. Also a beautiful city with the same sea.
Yeah, and I've been living in California for the last 21 years, and
so now you're in California.
Yeah, and I'm a scientist. So, and I just posted again. Thomas mentioned before, absolutely, and consciousness, and so I posted again a spiritual teacher you may know, David Hawkins. So I posted the link to learn about him, just.
So you're a scientist of what? What is your
immunology, microbiology, and biology?
Microbiology. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, so
I studied it for 1 year at the Hebrew University.
Oh, nice. So you have the vocabulary. So
yes.
Thomas, you mentioned a few things just to wrap up. You said at the beginning that it got you by surprise. I won't mention everything, but that you assume that this is shocking. We don't know what is the source. Is a conspiracy? Is it something that was made by hand? The virus, right? Not the vaccine, because sometimes you mention vaccine, the virus. On the other hand, it's not clear if the source is from the bat, so how it came, right? And what we're supposed to do, how we can really get into this knowledge. So it's really, everything is very important. Thank you. I think, thank you for bringing this up. So I must tell that I'm not surprised. Actually, I'm surprised why did it happen now and not before. And the reason is, first, 70% of the diseases, their source is from animals, okay? Because we intruded the animals in nature, right? We came close to them, and they have all this set of viruses and diseases. And the virus, this is the nature of the virus and bacteria, right? Like us, to expand, to change their genome, right? The viruses utilize the animal cells and infect them. And then actually they are not living identity, right? It's just DNA or RNA wrapped within a kind of envelope. And then they utilize the cells to expand and to infect other cells like that. And they keep changing and changing. So their ability to jump into humans is really, really, like, it's incredible. That's what they do. So if we are so close to the animals and we treat them in that manner, we shouldn't be surprised that we are getting their diseases.
Can I interrupt you for a moment? Aren't you being too naive?
No, believe me.
What about the manipulation, manipulation?
Yeah. Let me finish one second. So this is from
let me just say to Gila, can I just say, Gila, just protocol wise, we're going to go around, each one of us say our bit about the virus. You joined us a bit late, but I did my talk. Now it's Rena, then we'll hear from Sean, and then you. Yeah, so each of us gets 5-10 minutes on the virus. And you can say your thing in a minute, okay? So there we are. Carry on, Rena.
Yes, so this is just a perspective from biologists, okay? That the diseases from animals are well known, again, 70%. And I study this, well, you know, I have in I have in the computer a talk about corona, which I can give you easily, like slides and everything. So get my words. It's beside of that, diseases happen through all the known history of human being, you know, like epidemic, pandemics, and very, very tough one. And we can talk philosophy, like what is the source? You know, I believe that ignorance, it comes from ignorance, but you know, this is another topic. This is another hat that I can wear. But so why to be surprised if there are, you know, if there is disease, especially because we are so connected. We are not separate. So if it starts with China and within China and the borders are open and they know about that and they don't protect and they don't tell anyone about that.
Yeah.
Why to be surprised, right? That's why I'm saying ignorance, right? The physician that found it, he reported about that, and they, you know, they shut his mouth. Eventually, he died. So you know, like human beings are in certain way of consciousness. That's where we are. That's where we are. We are, you know, there is way to go. And to get to embrace things like with responsibility and know that we are really, really connected, and whatever we do affect others. So that's, you know, like, so the fact that there is pandemics is, I'm not surprised. And I think this is a way for human beings to uplift their awareness, to learn, to know what's going on, to know that, you know, we are here together. And so we can learn it in the tough way if we are not getting it, you know, in our Bet Knesset, shul, mosque, and churches. That's another tough way to learn, right?
Sure. So it's an educational thing for us. Yeah. Can I just ask a question?
Yes. But I have more to answer to your previous questions. Can we just 1 second? Unless you know.
Keep going. I'm looking. That's what I want to get to. Yeah.
Yes. With regard to whether it's conspiracy, look,
No, let's avoid the word
I,
conspiracy. Let's not
yeah,
use
yeah.
that. That's
No,
too.
not conspiracy,
Is
but
it
what is
man-made
handmade?
or is
Yeah.
it natural? That's
So
the question.
scientists question this. There was a scientist that was really like raised, like, what's going on? How come there is one? And I can explain more like in more professional and simple manner. There is certain sequence in the virus that demand the purin. It's like it's an enzyme. It's a human enzyme, which is really common to cut and activate this virus. And it was questioned, how come we got this sequence? Because we don't see it in the most close virus, part of this family, the most close, right? This is SARS-CoV-2. In SARS-CoV-1, we don't see this virus. So this scientist, he asked this question, and everyone was like, is it engineer? Is it engineer? But then he went with his groups and more scientists investigate and saw that actually these sequences exist in other viruses in the family. So it's not something that we don't see in viruses. And he says, like, based on this, I back off. I said that it's very possible that that it's natural as it is. I cannot say that, there wasn't any manipulation or something like that. This is not like, but scientifically, it's clear that it could be evolved from animals. And again, you have to understand, this is what viruses do. They keep evolving and hijacking. And it's just like a dance between human cells and viruses. And we can see it like as a bad thing. I don't see it as a bad, like, of course, people are dying and it's really, really sad. With that, that's how nature operates. That's how nature operates. We keep changing and changing and changing. That's how our immune system always develop new antibodies, new type of way to fight and account different viruses. We already came with the potential to recognize all foreigner. This is amazing potential that we have. All foreigners within us. We still have to account them. We have to develop to develop our potential, and then again the system is getting more expanded. It's just beautiful. So that's what it is. Okay. That's
well, thank you very much, Rena. That's very eloquent, and you're like a poet of science. It raises many philosophical questions for us, which maybe we can discuss a bit later. But Sean, I think it's your turn to say your bit about the virus. What questions have you got? What do you think's going on here?
Well, thanks very much, Rita. That's very interesting, that contribution, because I mean, I wouldn't be an expert in it, but from a peace point of view, we know, well, some of us know that there is an awful lot of research into this type of weaponizing nature, whatever, whether it's viruses or whatever. And, this may or may not have escaped from a research lab, and it may be accidental or it may be deliberate, but that work is going on. So really, you didn't really mention that because you're talking about nature and the evolution of viruses within nature, but there's a whole new field in military evilness in the research in every country, in every major country like the United States, China, Russia, into areas of how more effectively we can kill people. So like Rita, but not like Tom, I'm not too surprised that this could be an engineered virus, engineered maybe deliberately as part of a weapons program, because that's happening. So I'm not sure how important this, if we can prove one way or the other whether it was natural or engineered. Yeah, over the last few years, I went to 1 or 2 conferences in Oxford and one in Cambridge. There's 2 centres. One is the Centre for the Study of Existential Risks, and they studying different areas. And one of the areas, of course, is the evolution of diseases and plagues and things like that. So I just went because I was interested to see what they were saying about different areas. So there is some awareness that, but I think the general public aren't really that fully aware that there's a lot of research going on in military institutions on viruses, and it's not surprising if they do escape. This one is quite a mild one compared to some of the ones that I think that you can read about that are being engineered at the moment. So I think we may be looking forward to more, even more deadly viruses, and whether they're natural or enhanced by, what did you say, gain of function? Is that what you said, Thomas? That's kind of
that's the term they use. In America, we speak.
Yeah, that's my little bit of contribution.
No, thank you very much. Thanks, Sean. I mean, as a philosopher, why it's important to clear this issue up, to me, is because in what's called Theodicy, in philosophy, we try and explain how there can be any kind of good God behind the universe with so much evil. This is a branch of philosophy called Theodicy, a word coined by Leibniz. And there's 2 types of evil that we have to explain. One is called natural evil, which is things like earthquakes or plagues caused by rats and mice, or, that's difficult enough. Like, why did Lisbon get an earthquake in 1700 that killed thousands of people and destroyed the city? Voltaire had to explain that, So that's natural evil. But then there's moral evil, where people do this to themselves. This is the Nazi Holocaust. This is Mengele. This is whoever, all the weapons of mass destruction. That's moral evil, which in a sense is even worse, I think. Natural evil, we can say, yeah, that's just nature. That's fine. That's nature. That's earthquakes. Moral evil is when we do it to ourselves, and that's more shocking. And so to me, as a philosopher, I want to know, are we dealing now on this planet with an outbreak of moral evil or an outbreak of natural evil? And they require different kinds of explanations. Anyway, let's move on to Priscilla, since you've been here very patiently and got up really early. What's your take on the virus, Priscilla, and any comments on what you've heard so far?
Oh, yeah. We've been talking about this for so long now. The very first thing, ironically, that I heard about the virus was from a Chinese man. And he said very specifically, this was engineered in a lab. And I didn't know what to make of the comment, okay, he's Chinese. And of course, there was a lot of anti-Chinese actions in the New York area that happened because of that, whatever it was. As I'm listening, and thank you, Rena, that was fascinating. I really have no scientific, understanding of that sort of thing at all. And that was very helpful for me. Again, I just learned so much from this group, and thank you so much, Rena. I appreciate that. But I just thought it was ironic that here's a Chinese man. Now, this very same man was a Chinese citizen at the time and has since married an American. So he now has dual citizenship here. And China will not let him back in because in order to get back into China, you have to have the Chinese vaccine. So he can't, he's a businessman too, who imports things. And that's just so fascinating to me that he can't go back to his own country because of this vaccine not being accepted. Even though, I don't know, I'm just really confused about all that. And then, Thomas started talking about the engineering thing too, but I have no idea. But isn't it possible that it was both engineered and it was related to animals? It seems like that, is a possibility. It's not really either or in some ways. So, but I'm not as interested in how it started as I am interested in how to get over this and how to handle it. And I feel grateful to be in New York City, even though we have some of the highest outbreaks of this, but it also feels like people, for the most part in the New York area, are very concerned about protecting ourselves. You know, I haven't gotten the virus. You know, I'm potentially at risk because of age and other illnesses, but I know how to protect myself, even though we have a granddaughter who does not believe in vaccines, and she tests herself like every day, kind of thing, you know. So we're always having this, you know, kind of dialogue.
Right.
For me,
and you've had the vaccine. You've had the vaccine, Priscilla.
Not only have I had the vaccine, but we ended up traveling, and our doctor said, because we were saying, is it safe for us to travel? You know, and the doctor said, get whatever third vaccine you can get. So I'm boosted, but I'm doubly boosted because I had Moderna and I wanted to stick with Moderna. So we both ended up getting a double dose, a third full shot of Moderna.
Okay.
So I don't know what that means, but
you get the prize. You're the most vaccinated.
Well, I know other people that have done that as well.
Okay.
And another issue too is that when you look at this as a global issue, I mean, I'm very privileged to have been able to get that third vaccine and to be able to get the double dose of it, you know, and I'm very privileged that I can get testing equipment. You know, I mean, it takes a little bit of wait time, but you know, we're stocked up with testing equipment right here, you know, so it's not fair. I mean, what happened in India, you know, the terrible outbreak. Although we experienced an outbreak here in New York City, where in our teaching classes at you know 7:30, we were all going to the windows and banging on pots, thanking the nurses and all the healthcare workers, and that felt good to us to do that, but it also, you know, felt that it was very, very much appreciated. So. But it does, I mean, Irina spoke about this too, that this is a global issue. What affects one person affects everybody, you know, and if there's ever an example of we're all in this together, it's this, you know.
Sure.
And
maybe that's the lesson we're to learn, as
I think so.
I think Rena was saying. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's you know, very vital to be aware of that, and you know, to make sure that, you know, people in India get as much vaccine as people in the United States, you know, that kind of thing. That I think is really a crucial issue here. And it doesn't seem really fair.
Right.
No.
You know,
That's another thing, the geopolitics of medicine.
Yeah.
Well, we can go down that rabbit hole as well.
It's not only
Okay.
yeah, it's just a remark, it's about 38% of the world population just gotten the full vaccine, the full amount. So not only in India, right? Many other
Africa, it's
so just 38%. Like I checked maybe a few weeks ago. Yeah. So
okay.
Still to
Right,
go.
let's hear from Gila in Herzliya. You've been very patient, Gila, and I think you've got some perspectives to share. Do unmute yourself and add your contribution if you can hear us.
You're mute,
dear.
Gila. At mute.
Unmute, yes. Okay.
Right, your turn
now
on the
it's
vaccine.
okay.
What do you think of the pandemic? You've been listening to us, hopefully.
Well, I must tell you that everything that you've said, all of you, I agree with everybody, because there are different angles to look at what is happening. And for instance, last night I had, I took part in another webinar with a very dedicated spiritual people, and they are very much against taking the vaccines. They say the vaccines are the tool of the current governments to control humanity. And those governments have dark elements in them, and those governments need basically to fall down in order that more enlightened governments will take place and will govern the world. So I'm very confused, to tell you the truth. I personally took the vaccine, but I know that many people think like that. And I don't think that we can, everybody will decide for himself, but I don't think there is a definite answer for that. And the other point I would like to bring up is, for instance, in my family, last week, my daughter-in-law, she got infected. The whole family received 3 vaccines, including the booster. So they were supposed to be immune, or
Yeah.
and nevertheless, she got infected. And my son, who lives with her in the same house, he wasn't infected. And also the 3 children were not infected. So the all 10 days they were together in the house, and the only one that got it at the end was her. So the vaccine doesn't protect you, really doesn't protect you. We have more and more evidence that even if you got the booster, you still get the disease. And so it's very confusing. I don't think that there is a definite answer. I think time will tell. And I think the more, as the philosophers, as you put it down, the interesting thing is, what is it doing to humanity as a global thing? Because whether it's natural or whether it was manipulated, it's changing, or it wants to change our patterns of behavior, and the way upon how we look upon life, and what we want to do with our lives, and how we care about others, and so. So definitely it will. And the third point is that this last what's the word for it? This last Omnicom. The last variation, okay? The last variation, they say it's very easy to get it, but on the other end, the symptoms are very light, not like the first ones. So that means that at the end, everybody will get it, and whether you are vaccinated or not vaccinated. And the global issue is how it is going to change our behavior, the way we look upon our lives, our consciousness, the way we care about others. And they say it's affecting our economy, it's affecting our traveling in the world. So it's affecting a lot of things. And a lot of things will have to change if it will keep coming in different variations. So this is just a general thing. I don't have answers. I'm just sharing with you my thoughts. I would say it like that.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Gila. That was
okay.
I mean, you spoke for many of us. People are in a state of confusion, if we're honest. Unless you have definitely made up your mind, in which case you have more intelligence than the American intelligence community. I think I've shared this before, but I go to the meetings of the Belfer Scientific Study for Intelligence at Harvard University, and I'm quite plugged into academic studies of intelligence. My PhD was on the Cold War, propaganda. So I'm used to the study of propaganda. I know when it's happening. And the Belfer Institute at Harvard University is one of the world's leading centers in the West, at least, for the study of intelligence. And I learned through them, well, it was public knowledge that President Biden, when he came into office, one of the first things he did was he commissioned a report by the American intelligence community into the origin of the virus. He wanted to know, like me, what's the etiology of this thing? And he got the CIA, the FBI, the NAC, all the different, like the American intelligence community, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people, budgets of millions, and they can access the dark web in a way that we can't. They can hack into people, you know. And they took 4 months and they presented a split verdict. They could not agree among themselves whether it was natural or artificial. They had evidence for both sides. And that's the entire American intelligence community was split. So they don't know either. They can't agree. So, you know, so like, it's not surprising we can't agree, or we don't know.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can't access the dark web. We don't have millions of pairs of hands that can hack away and do all that. And even they couldn't find out. So I come back to my sort of point that philosophically we've entered a very weird time of, I mean, maybe the teaching is that I think somebody has said, you know, how do we cope with the unknowability of existence?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, like philosophers have been dealing with this for a long time. One of the best strategies is we suspend judgment. We practice what's called epoche, which is the essence of scientific method and philosophical reason. If you don't know something, you practice epoche, you suspend judgment, which is the quintessence of both academic method, but also particularly phenomenology. It was talked about by Husserl as a philosophical strategy. You know, we don't know if the soul's immortal or not. Buddha practiced epoche. When people came to Buddha and said, you know, am I immortal? Are there gods? He would say, my dear friend, suspend judgment on that and wait till you find out. But meanwhile, practice the virtuous path. And that, I think, is what Gila was saying. We don't know, but what we can do is try to be kinder, more compassionate to each other. We can cultivate our own inner knowing. We can be kinder to our family, etc. And in doing that, if we all do that individually, then the planet will become perhaps more transparent to knowing. I don't know. Rena, do you want to respond? I mean, you're the expert on the virus. Is there anything you'd like to add before we move on to another topic?
Yes, thank you. I would like to mention one more thing to emphasize. I mentioned that we are intruding animals, and you know, we are becoming very close to them, and the way that we treat them, and you know, it's not surprising that if the virus was in a bat and bat, for example, was eaten raw, you know, then it's more easier to spread it. But it's really important to see all of this from a perspective of whole, that we are together here within nature, part of nature, and exist with millions of animals. And it's impossible to continue like that to destroy, to put in danger millions of species. We are now in an environmental crisis. And believe me, I'm reaching out to so many people, educated people. People don't know enough what's going on. This is what's going on from my point of view is a wake-up call for humanity. You have to wake up. It's impossible that so many species are in danger. Just example, 10 out of 17 types of whale that visit the Arctic Ocean are in danger. The other 7, most of them are in high risk. So you know what it means in danger? That there is a possibility that they won't be among us. And nature is so vast and in kind of equilibrium. So if one part is going like that, we don't need to be surprised if human beings, are being shifted. And we cannot treat only compassion, between human beings. We have to be compassionate to our animals, to our nature, to all what's around us. Yes. So and Gila, thank you for bringing up, this feedback from these so-called spiritual people that and I know, and I'm familiar with this from some religious people in Israel that say don't get vaccine. And I give you also example of a physician that I was working with that say no vaccine. Religious people from a religious person from Laniado, no vaccine, no vaccine. He was one of the managers, a physician in the corona department, and he got sick the first time, and then no vaccine, and the second time he got he had to be with them in the ER with with equipment to breathe. The rescue is life. So we can talk highly, but see fact. The vaccine definitely protective. There was a study after in Israel with Clalit. 1,115,000 people participate in this study and clearly show that the third boost protect people from dying, from getting severe diseases. So yes, it's possible that people that are still, with vaccine will get them infected, but they are less likelihood that they will be sick, severe sick or die. And the example that you gave, it's a beautiful one. Yes, in this entire family that they got vaccine, one person got sick, but still his family members weren't sick. So that means that, the virus could get inside his body. So, and the reason, again, we get the vaccine inside our muscles, into our body, but the type of antibodies are not going, it's not IgA, it's not antibodies that going into our, like membrane here, mucous. So we still can, so there are not so much antibodies here. So the virus can get here and can get the immune system, not 100% protect the interests of the virus, but still it will protect from it's expanded. So and again, I respect people that don't want to take the vaccine, and I respect their decision to be responsible with the consequences. Yeah, So and I want also to say I like to get things with acceptance and with love, and my God is love, and I see a lot of good things that happen from the corona. For example, I would never see you, I would never talk with you. The Zoom is one example. I can reach out to many more people, and to connect with more people around the world. I participate in so many more conferences, and then the knowledge can transfer more easily. Again, as I mentioned before, I think it's a boosting of uplifting. And I posted the Albert Camus, Camus in English. This is one of the philosophers that I really admire, that that gave the plug, his book, right? Thomas, you saw it, right?
The Plague, I read that.
The Plague, yeah. So it's not only the book that is example of plague that happening, but it's the philosophy that until the heart of people won't be expanded to see how we are one here, we may keep getting all this.
Sure. Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think let's move on from the topic of the vaccine, because we've spent the first half of our meeting on it. And we've got some other grounds to work through.
Yes, Thomas, I'm so sorry. I just want to say that I have a shacharit today. I'm praying in the shul. We have in person.
Okay.
And I will have to depart really, really soon. And I apologize for that.
Well, look, Irina, why don't, before you go, just give us 5 minutes about
Yes.
maps. Just tell us about maps,
But
what it is.
but is it okay that next time I will present
Yeah,
here with
next
Karen?
time do it properly with the slides, but this time just give us a little bit of an
Yes.
introduction.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So Parvati Foundation is it's the organization that speak about the condition of the Arctic Ocean, how the situation there, as I mentioned before, is very in risk, very risky, because the ice is vanishing, like it's melting in a very accelerated manner, and the ice is our air conditioner. Okay, it's the cool system. It's the system that keep us cool, because we have the albedo effect that take away the heat back to the atmosphere. So what happened now that the ice is melting, governments and businesses try to take advantages, and they are coming inside to exploit, and military. There is a gap of military in the Arctic Ocean. It's really, really not doesn't look good. So what we did in Parvati, we established a treaty, an agreement to change the law of the sea in order to make all this area as a marine protected area, and we call it MAPS. What we try to do, we try to reach out to people like what I do now, to explain the situation, and to reach out to scientists. We just published an open letter from scientists to sign, to express their support. And we hope to get 20,000 signatures of scientists and to take this to policymakers. And again, we speak with everyone. We speak with policymakers, with NGOs. Yeah, so I hope this was clear. And again, I really, really hope that you will be here next week, and you will hear more details. Karen, my colleague, she co-lead the outreaching together with me, will be here, and we will present together.
Yeah, in January, next month.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Yeah. And
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any question, Thomas, if
Sure.
like if there is any burning. Yeah.
Can I just ask you, Rena, have you been up to the Arctic yourself? And what
No.
made you?
No,
You've not yet been up.
No, I don't think I will go, honestly. I don't think I don't think that there is a place to unless there is something that will really make my appearance there helpful to survive, to support this ecosystem. But we against any tourism. No, anything, any shipping that destroy the ice, anything that just yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so that's the reason that I want. I'm not feeling like this can
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, no, I understand. Okay, anyone got any questions, Serena, before she goes, about her maps thing or the virus? You can sneak in another virus question.
If possible, Tom, I just wanted to ask: is that the Marine Arctic Peace Zone? Is it modelled on the Antarctic Treaty? You know, the Antarctic Treaty, where they've tried to keep that area of the planet free from military. So I assume it's in that area. One of the reasons I'm asking is the Irish government are now, after how many years, 50 years of that treaty, we're now just going to ratify. We're going to be one of the countries to ratify the Antarctic Treaty, because there's a Green part of the Irish government, the Green Party, and I'd love to get them involved as well in this one, because we're much closer to the Arctic as an island nation than we are to the Antarctic. So thanks for giving us that, and we look forward to next month's contribution.
Yeah, Sean, you brought up such an important remark. Thank you so much. The Antarctic is in the South Pole, right? And it's much easier for government to embrace it, because the Arctic is still and the Antarctic is still frozen. Government cannot go and exploit it, right? And also the Arctic was a peace place before. It was always peace. although, you know, there was like kind of Cold War, and Gorbachev was saying in his lecture, you know, we have to keep it peaceful, but still, it wasn't possible for government to go inside with icebreaker because the ice was intact. Now in Antarctic, the ice is intact, and the Antarctic is surrounded by ocean, and so it's totally different. So it will be much easier to continue, you know, to rectify this disagreement over there. But unfortunately, it's not the same in the Arctic Ocean, and yes, and we will speak. You know, we have, when we talk, and maybe I can share with you the science letter, the open letter, and we have some paragraph that compare between the Antarctic and the Arctic, and you know, just as example why it's so important and why we need to do the same as in the Antarctic. Thank you for raising it. And by the way, if you are connected to any policy makers, to any, you know, ministers, Thomas, you have your friend that from Armenia. We really, so far, just only we need 99 signatures of world leaders to sign up the treaty in order, you know, to change the law. And so far we have only 2 countries that sign, small island. So we welcome any person.
Well, I think we should try and get Ireland, Sean. You should work on the Green Party.
Oh,
and
Sean, please.
We'll get Ireland to sign it. That would be great.
So I'm going to post in the chat my email address and the letter for science. If you can read it and let me know your thoughts, and if you can share it within your networks, anyone. And it's not only for scientists, it's really a channel to educate everyone, every human being, what's going on there, because it's underreported. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. A second.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Rena.
Absolutely. Thank you, Thomas. Yeah.
From the Irish perspective, Brendan the Navigator was a great Irish navigator who crossed the Atlantic and went up to Greenland, and you know, they've just made a discovery on some remote island up in you know, north of the Orkneys. They found some Irish hermits got there before the Vikings even. So, you know, the Irish got about. So they ought to sign this Arctic Treaty. I think that's very important. Okay, moving on then. I just want to report, we were talking about the Caucasus issue in the last couple of meetings, and our friends haven't come to this meeting. Maybe they got the time muddled up. But I just want to report back on that because it's quite interesting. So, as you know, it arose because we have on our board for the European World Intellectual Forum an Armenian gentleman, Gevork Manoukian, who with me drafted a declaration calling for sort of, you know, some reasoned way of resolving the conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, last year, in November 2020, the Azerbaijan government attacked Nagorno-Karabakh. In their mind, they regard it as their territory, and therefore they were not doing a war of aggression, they were doing a war of reclamation. And we've heard from our Azerbaijani colleague, you know, that's how they see it. They argue that the UN gives sovereignty rights for a country to reclaim its own territory. So they're saying this is an inviolable part of their country. They have the right to reclaim it militarily. The Armenians have a different perspective. They think it's their country. They call it Artsakh. And this has been a disputed territory ever since, you know, the foundation, certainly of the Soviet Union. In the days of the Soviet Union, the USSR, this territory, Nagorno-Karabakh, had a special autonomous status within Azerbaijan. And I think that it would be very interesting historically to find out how it was managed during the old USSR, because this conflict didn't come to fighting in those days. They were part of Azerbaijan, which was a separate Soviet republic, but they had some kind of autonomous status. But once the Soviet Union broke up, it's one of the collateral damage things that's happened. Because without the guarantor of the USSR sort of overall protecting their rights, so Azerbaijan looks at the map and says, hey, that little thing, it's within our country, so we want it back. You know, and from their perspective, that makes a sort of logic. And for a while, it was a frozen conflict, although in the 1990s, it blew up into a rather major war. And there was a lot of slaughter and killing and human rights violations and all the rest of it. And because it's got a religious element, there were massacres and destructions of sacred sites and all that. It's got an Islamic versus Christian element to it. And so it's a case study for the World Intellectual Forum. You know, how can we make contact with intellectuals on both sides? Well, we have sort of, but they won't really, you know. So then we got this treaty, this statement, but there were two diametrically opposed types of statement. Now, what I tried to do as coordinator is put them into one statement. So that I had the words from the Armenian chap and the words from the Azerbaijani chap, and I put them together and I called that the statement. The problem is that only the Armenian would sign that for reasons known to the gods. So that's where we're at now. And I've given ample opportunity to the Azerbaijanis to say, no, let's change this or change that. But it comes down to this question of sovereignty. The Azerbaijanis won't sign anything that give the slightest chance or flicker of the rights of the Armenians to any kind of sovereignty. That seems to me non-negotiable for them. It's like we have the absolute right to this territory because it's ours. That is non-negotiable. The problem with that, and they invoke the UN to say, the United Nations, you know, is like deals with nations. The problem with that is that if we go down that route, then we could say that the people of southern Cyprus have the same right to invoke that the whole of the island of Cyprus belongs to them. It's non-negotiable, you know. And there'd be continual war between northern and southern Cyprus. Because let's face it, the Turkish Cypriots invaded. And then what about Israel-Palestine? I suppose the Palestinians could invoke that and say, this is all our land. You know, this is Palestine. You don't have the right to be here. Or I suppose the Israelis could invoke it and say, yes, well, you know. So in reality, maybe. And then there's the question of Ukraine. And if you're going to take that point of view, then Ukraine could invoke that and say that the people trying to secede in the eastern part of Ukraine are breaking international law, so the UN should intervene. You know, there are lots of these messy conflicts, and that's just a few of them around the world. A lot of them take the form of civil wars. When, you know, borders are not straightforward. We were talking earlier about interconnectedness. Well, it can also be a problem because we are interconnected, but geopolitics hasn't caught up with that. We still think in terms of nations. Maybe we should be inventing something called internations or internationalism. I mean, I'm a world federalist. I'm a Canadian citizen as well as a British. And I want a kind of world federation where we're all part of a common body politic. Yeah, we respect our home country, but we also like to travel. Human beings are travelers, aren't we? And I would love everyone to be able to travel and visit each other's countries. I've traveled in 35 countries in my life. I've never been attacked, beaten up, or shot at. I'd love to be able to travel to all countries in peace. So anyway, I just wanted to report back on that. Has anyone got any comments? Have you read the declaration? I sent it out with the invite. It's in the end of my long newsletter. Does anyone think it could be improved? Have I been fair to both sides, you know, etc.? Any comments? Sean, do you want to go first?
Yeah, no, I have to apologize. I went through the newsletter, but I didn't read the declaration, and I'm very interested. I certainly would read it. It's just unfortunate the time got mixed up today, because I think our members from Armenia and from would have been on, because there was an important follow-up, because you said you were going to do that. So I think, should we leave that debate till the next month, and hopefully they'll be back on at that stage then, because you would hear why he won't sign that, why the Azerbaijani member.
It would be nice to find out his perspective. So, okay, if anyone's else got a comment to make, otherwise I think, Sean, you're right. We'll leave it till next month. There's another pressing issue as well. Any other comments about?
Thomas,
Rina.
I really have to go. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say how I admire your efforts and your detailed perspective and your care, and I want to, you know, I would like to read it in a way that, you know, if I need to say anything, I would like to learn it more, you know, more carefully. And I'm happy to give you feedback. Okay.
Okay, so go away and before next month, read the newsletter that I sent you, and the declaration at the end on Armenia and stuff. And then next month, do a presentation on maps with the slides and everything. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And
okay,
again,
give my love to California. We love you.
I posted my email address. Feel free to contact me. Excellent. All the best.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
See you next month.
See you.
Right. Agila, do you have any comments about Armenia?
I have a general thing, not about the specifically the I read it, but it's a long time ago, not lately, and I don't exactly remember the details. But
sure.
I can join Rina saying that I'm admiring your efforts to put up something that both sides would be able to sign on it. The thing is, you know, the emotions. People have too many emotions about sovereignty, and we talked before about evolution of consciousness. This is one of the things that as a humanity we need to do. If I know how to do it, I don't know. Maybe the virus is a trigger to teach us to go beyond sovereignty and look upon other things as important. But as long as there will be such strong emotions about states and nationality and all the things that comes with that, we'll have this kind of conflicts. So it's something that has to be changed from the inside, not only from the outside. You can't introduce an outsider solution. You know, if I take it to Israel, so on the news, you always hear about the conflicts between what the Israeli army is doing and what the Palestinians are doing, and so on and so on. But the people who live there in those places, more often than not, they have got good relationship. They learn to live together, to coexist together, and to respect each other. And at the end, this is the most important thing. As years go by, more and more people learn how to live together. So if you talk to them privately, they all want a good life, you know, for their families and make a livelihood, and they don't care so much about the borders. They just want to enjoy life as a person. But there are always the politicians and the extremists on the sides that incites the people and incites the emotions and create the conflict and break the harmony. And you know, things happen. Some young teenager with too many hormones take a knife in the morning and tried to slaughter somebody, and then you have a big fire break up. So a big issue. So for the long run, I think that what is more important is the fact that people will learn to coexist together, and everyday life makes it happen. That's the most optimistic thing that I can say about it.
No, that's very important. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, let me just add something about emotions and conflict. And maybe we can ask Priscilla to tell us a bit more about her views on this. But I want to share a story. Each day here at the Peace Centre, we start with morning prayers. And with my New Zealand friend here yesterday, and I have a book. I look up events that happened in history on this day. So we say some prayers and do a reading. Yesterday was the anniversary of the Battle of Wounded Knee, which took place in 1890 in America. And I read the whole story. And there's a famous book by an American Indian author, D. Brown, called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. Because I'm Canadian, I've always loved the American Indian story, you know. And this was a tragedy. This was the end of the end for the American Indians. Sitting Bull had already been killed. There was no one left to resist. They were all rounded up on reservations. And the story of Wounded Knee is the following. It's worth telling. It was a little band of Sioux who were broken. They were just a couple of hundred, 350 of them, were trying to get to another part of the reservation lands. They were inspired by the ghost dance tradition, which was a religious idea that had swept the Plains Indians. A prophet called Wovoka had taught them that Great Spirit said, if you do this dance, you will be protected. You know, they'd lost their homes, they'd lost their buffalo ranges, they'd lost their lands, but they could dance. And if you dance, the ghosts of the ancestors will dance with you. And if you dance enough, they will come back, and the buffalo will come back, the grass will grow, and your people will be strong again. So all over the Plains Indians, it's like, you know, it's a kind of last chance saloon for the American Indian culture was to do this dance. And but the whites, the American cavalry soldiers, didn't like it because it was giving the Indians strength. When they came together and danced, it annoyed them. So they were trying to arrest the leaders of the dance movement, and they failed. Anyway, so the last of these ghost dancers were Sioux Indians. They were traveling to this place called Wounded Knee, and the cavalry caught up with them. It was winter. It was the 27th, 28th of December, bitterly cold. And they basically arrested the chief, who was called Bigfoot. He had pleurisy. He put him in an ambulance. And the men and the women and children were told to march to this place. And they were surrounded by the soldiers. And they were going to, in the next morning, they were going to confiscate all the guns. Then a new colonel arrived who took over control, the 7th Cavalry. And he was running the cavalry that Custer had lost his battle with. Anyway, they surrounded this little band of 350 American Indian women and children. And the next day, they said, okay, now bring all your guns, lay them here in a pile. So everyone did, all the men. Then they said, no, that's not enough. Search the teepees. They searched the teepees. They found a few knives and tent pegs even, anything that could be used as a weapon. they put them in a pile. This was deliberate humiliation, actually, of these are proud Indian Sioux being forced at gunpoint to hand over everything, even their little hunting knives. But that's part of the story of conflicts, is deliberately humiliating the enemy, right? And they'd lined up machine guns overlooking them. They found in one of the teepees, one guy had one rifle that he hadn't surrendered. And they shouted at him, you know, bring it here, surrender. The guy was deaf. They didn't know this. He couldn't understand what they were saying. He was a young blood. He was very proud. And he was not going to be bullied by these people. This is a tragic story. And like Gila just said, you know, he had high hormones, right? So he started shouting and hollering, and he fired the gun off into the air, not aggressively, just like, you're not taking my gun, it's my gun. And he didn't understand what was going on. He couldn't hear, he was deaf. And the minute that one bullet was fired, the 7th Cavalry opened up with their entire arsenal, machine guns and sharpshooters, and onto the women and children and men gathered there defenseless in the snow. And they just gunned them down, right, in cold blood. I mean, this massacre, it's called the Wounded Knee Massacre. And there was no excuse for it. And then a few people tried to run away across the snow, and they were shot with these machine guns. They discovered there were about 300 were shot outright and killed. A few more were wounded and died later, and they were left to freeze to death. Very few survived. And this was regarded as the end of the road for American Indian. It's the last battle. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre.
Actually, yeah.
You know, but to me, that symbolizes like that's what human beings are capable of. And you're right to say it's emotions, Gila, because it was I don't know, the American cavalry wanted to humiliate the Indians because of the Custer defeat some years before. There was a racist element. They despised the American Indians. They didn't regard them as fully human. They thought they were backward. Maybe there's a guilt because they know they've actually stolen the land and they'd been cheating them and breaking the treaties and stealing more and more land. So if you're feeling guilty, you want to eradicate the thing that makes you feel guilty. So, you know, if you kill them all, then nobody's left to tell the tale.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
You know, there's so many psychological dynamics at play in that sort of. And then there's the desire to humiliate. My friend Evelyn Lindner, Dr. Evelyn Lindner, she runs the International Society for Humiliation and Dignity Studies. She did a PhD on humiliation and extreme conflict. She looked at the Rwanda genocide, for example, and other extreme genocides, and found that they're always involving humiliation. So, you know, how do we eradicate that? Now, Evelyn gave a lecture a couple of weeks ago and said that we have 10 years, according to climate scientists, to turn the planet around. But during that 10 years, we have to unlearn 10,000 years of behavior. Because we're so used to thinking tribally. It's my tribe's the best, your tribe's the enemy. We have to unlearn all that in the next 10 years if we're going to survive. Otherwise, we're going to kind of go out like the Indians. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. It's because it's the anniversary of Wounded Knee, and it's been on my mind. And I was very moved, Priscilla, when you talked about in the beginning, you honored the American Indian land. You know, they're very pleased with you for doing that. Thank you. Can you tell us, Priscilla, so it's your go really, can you explain what high conflict is? You talked about that in your introduction. How could that study of high conflict affect our peacemaking in the Caucasus? I mean, those are mountains. Is that high conflict? Is it because it's in mountains?
Yeah, the high conflict is an example of, sometimes people use the term intractable conflict, where it doesn't seem like there's any kind of solution. And one of the key things is that that the conflict, it goes beyond the conflict itself, and the conflict becomes the conflict. I think that's one of the major points of Amanda's book, that it's you're not even looking rationally anymore at what the issues are. It's the conflict itself just takes off. And Peter Coleman makes some we should probably do a whole thing on this because it's really important new information. But one of the things that they do talk about is creating some space between people and issues in the conflict, and so time and space can be healing in some cases, as long as the conflict is not allowed to escalate even more. And a lot of what they're talking about, I'm just going to look at some notes that I made about the course. I had to return the library books just yesterday, actually, so I hadn't finished all of them. But one of the points that they make is to try to focus on what is something positive in the relationship, but after time and space has gone on, then to kind of look at what's something that we have in common, and kind of try to build on that. Peter Coleman at Columbia University had these meetings over several years where he would bring together people of different perspectives on different issues, and they would go through and listen to each other. And he did have some success, not always, but the ground rules idea that you had kind of alluded to earlier, Thomas, and that we use in our restorative circles a lot, that we agree not to put each other down, we agree not to not to interrupt, we agree all sorts of very civil things, that we agree to. And those were things that Peter Coleman used in his Columbia University dialogues. And that led to some success, not always. I mean, I think one of the messages too is not every conflict can be resolved, and those of us in the conflict resolution field don't like to believe that, because we like to think that, if we just keep working at it, but sometimes just letting go of the fact that, not kind of buying into the conflict was something that both Amanda and Peter Coleman mentioned. It might be good to try to invite them to come to one of these and talk a little bit, because I think
if you get their emails, that would be good. I'll send them the invite to come along. What's Amanda's surname?
Let's see, what is her name? I'm blocking on what her last name is.
Well, don't worry. Look it up and send me by email.
Yeah.
I'll invite them. Yeah, I think there's the psychology of all this is very interesting. In my doctoral thesis on conflict resolution, the history of it over the last 50 years, I wrote a whole chapter on psychology. And, I explored the hypothesis that transpersonal psychology can find common ground even in intractable conflicts. I would like to say that no conflict cannot be solved over time.
Mm-hmm.
But I have come to the view that, okay, I look at these things from a very, very long time perspective. And if you factor in, as I do, the evidence of the survival of consciousness after death, I think souls sometimes seem to come in with conflicts already written on them. And this is a topic for a big discussion another time, perhaps. But let's take sort of intractable conflicts like Armenia and Azerbaijan, say. The Muslims of Azerbaijan have been fighting the Christian Armenians for, I don't know, at least 500 years in various forms. And I was reading a biography of the young Stalin, which was very interesting, by a very famous historian, Simon Sebag Montefiore. He's a great British historian. And he did that. I recommend this book, The Young Stalin. He did all the research in the archives in Russia that's now available to scholars about Stalin's early years. And he started out as he was training to be a priest in a seminary in Tiflis, I think. And he was he was always getting into trouble with the priests because he read Darwin and decided he was an atheist at about the age of 17. So he would smuggle in Darwin and atheist literature into the seminary at night and read them under his blanket by torchlight. And the head priest would come along and confiscate them. From there, he graduated to becoming a Marxist. And in those days, the Marxist movement in the Caucasus was organized like an underground terrorist network, a bit like the IRA was in the, I don't know, 1930s or 40s. It was a secret army. And so if you're a Marxist, it meant you had stockpiling of weapons. And Stalin became a weapons expert and a bandit leader. And they were attacking Russian government convoys, stealing money to buy more guns, to do more killing, you know. But even he couldn't solve the Armenian Azerbaijani conflict. It was going on even in his day. So, you know, how we can, what light can intellectuals shed on that when they're ingrained attitudes of actually centuries of antipathy? And I suppose the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is another of these ingrained attitudes of centuries of sort of social social construction, you know, that you have of the other. The other is, you know, is evil, wicked, inhuman, and so on. I mean, I've seen this with Brexit. I thought Britain was happy being a European country. I thought most sensible British people accept our European identity. We like being part of the European Union. But suddenly, out of nowhere, this sort of British imperial, we're the best nation arose in the media. And suddenly the Europeans became the enemy in the press. And I saw this sort of British racism rear its head, which is, for me, it's been very disturbing to live through that. So anyway, any comments on on that? What do you make of Young Stalin?
Can I just come in for a minute there?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that, you know, centuries of conflict. But one thing that kind of struck me at the last meeting was the Armenian member, and at one stage in his presentation, he just gave a little cameo picture of something that happened the previous week. Now the conflict has settled down a bit because the Russian peacekeepers are there, yeah. But there is still, and so a farmer was in the field, an Armenian, a farmer was in his field, and a sniper killed him. Just, you know, shot him and killed him. Yeah. I mean, the bitterness there, the raw bitterness that would come from that, because it was a total waste of a life for poor man himself, for his family, for his friends, and the bitterness in the community. And, you know, there was no conflict. The conflict had stopped even on a temporary basis, and there are killers. But what we as peace researchers would say, that those killers are on both sides. I mean, the Armenian perspective was that killer was the enemy on the other side, but there were people on the Armenian side probably doing similar terrible acts. And we have, you know, if we're preaching anything, is to say, once the conflicts start, like in in a hot conflict after, connected to centuries of bitterness. Once you start killing, people start killing each other, it's very hard for any sort of rational peace approach until that stops. As Priscilla was saying, we need space and you need time. So hopefully in that part of Europe at the moment, with the Russian peacekeepers, there is a bit of space being developed and a bit of time, so that the intellectuals on both sides could come together and say, yes, that waste of life of those individuals, like that farmer, has to stop, and it has to stop from both sides. It's not just one side will commit those crimes. That's the only thing. Thanks.
No, thank you. That's very important. And I think the status of the talks under the EU, European Union, Michel, the new foreign minister, they've made progress. Azerbaijan and Armenian governments have been making progress. So it's kind of good news, really, we hope. Let me raise the final issue I think let's talk about in our last few minutes, which is in my invitation letter, I pointed this out. Because the World Intellectual Forum was set up in India, and I was at its forum meeting foundation, I was very disturbed to read a report in the New York Times this last week, which I sent you a quote from in the invite. This Hindu extremist group had a meeting outside Delhi, not far, 100 miles from Delhi. And a whole bunch of sort of Hindu leaders, so-called Hindu leaders, I don't think they're real Hindus, swore an oath to the death to fight and kill all Muslims in India and chase them out of India. And this is sort of religious oath they took. And I read that article in the New York Times. I was very disturbed by that sort of, I'm supposed to be teaching a course on non-killing starting in January. And here we have people taking an oath to kill Muslims in India. And yet, I've been to India many times and I've met many Muslims, many Hindus, many Christians, and, the rabbi of Delhi is a friend of mine, the Baha'is. India, I love India because it's a multicultural, multi-faith haven. And I worked as the education officer of the Gandhi Foundation for 10 years. And, I love the India of many colors, many races, the India that was helped by theosophists like Annie Besant and Gandhi himself, who spoke at Theosophical Society lodges in South Africa. So what's happened? How can we have an India that suddenly got space for these racist Hindus to proclaim they're going to kill all the Muslims? I was shocked by that. And, I would like to discuss this matter. Why has India suddenly become a haven for these right-wing racists? And how can Hinduism be happy? Why aren't more people speaking out about it? So anyway, any comments anyone would like to venture? You know what India's like. Priscilla, what did you read my quote there?
I did see the article in the Times, and even when we were at our conference, that was going on.
There were riots in the streets of Delhi, weren't there? Between Muslims.
Yes. So it's certainly, and that's really why Gandhi was killed. Really, I'm always shocked to think about that, but because he was so it's certainly not a new conflict, and in a sense, it is one of those intractable conflicts. To me, from an American perspective, it's like a hate crime, and one of the things that the U.S. government has done is that if a crime is committed in the name of a hate crime, and that's whether there's any threat of violence, the punishment is much, much more severe because of the nature of a hate crime. And so I've been following the hate crimes that are actually recorded by the FBI of all things, and we see the ebb and flow. But what group do you think has the most hate crimes in the United States directed against it? What would you all say?
Well, the black community, I imagine,
That's
would
right.
have.
That's right. And I ask that all the time in our workshops in the United States, and nobody comes up with that because it's so enculturated as, you know, as a existence that even young men of color, which is the primary group that's attacked, you know, young black men.
Yeah.
They don't get that they're the high. It was so
Really?
far off the charts. There's like 6,000 cases a year, every year that FBI records it.
Against the black community.
Yes, yes.
So can you define a
mostly
hate
men.
crime for us, Priscilla? What is a hate crime?
A hate crime is any threat or act of violence because of race, gender, sexual orientation, cultural background, religion. So in fact, over the years, the next biggest group, what would you say it is?
Probably the Jewish community, I imagine.
That's right. Have you studied this, Thomas?
No, well, yeah, I've been studying.
Because most people will say Muslim or gay, LGBTQ issues, and that LGBTQ is actually the third category of most. And sometimes it goes back and forth between anti-Jewish and anti-LGBTQ. But those are repeatedly those three groups. And, you know, like different things happen where there's a little bit more anti-Muslim bias or a little bit more anti-Chinese bias, but you know, those are, you know, regulated by events that happen, but repeatedly for like 10, 15, 20, I don't think it's 20 years that they've been doing it, but 10 years at least, that every year, those are the statistics, you know, like 6,000 anti-black, and there might be 1,500 anti-Jewish hate crimes. And then there might be, you know, 1,600 anti-LGBTQ bias, which those are mostly directed at gay men in the LGBTQ bias.
So the hate crime is it the threat of the violence? Is that the hate crime, or is it if there's actual violence?
It's both. It's both. If
Okay.
somebody in Massachusetts, and it's a state by state law too, that's another issue, because some states are more inclined, like Massachusetts and New York. But in Massachusetts, if you make a comment threatening to do violence toward anybody, that is almost as severe of a punishment as if you actually did the violence. So the threat.
So it can be, well, that's kind of good, because the Jains say that verbal violence.
Yes,
You're
yes.
supposed to abstain from violence of thought, word, and deed. So
yes,
you can't even think the violence against another group, you know.
right.
But that's to reach a state of enlightenment, which is hard for us humans to reach.
And the realization that those people who are doing the hate crime really feel like they're doing something good. I mean, that's a shocking realization.
Yeah,
They really feel that they're being morally correct. You
well,
know?
of course, you see the Hindus that met in India a week ago and made this oath. They're getting high on feeling they're the good people, because they've got the courage to stand up to protect India. Everyone else is a weak liberal and I did have one comment from our colleague Aaron, who often speaks at our meetings. He was going to attend, but I don't know, maybe got the time muddled up. So he said to me, Thomas, your comments, yeah, fine. But look, you know, India is still the most tolerant country. Let's be honest, it is the Muslims who are the most violent. Let's not muddle up here. The Muslim, like countries like Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, he quoted a couple of other countries, said they're the ones that don't allow other religions, whereas we in India do. So I think he was arguing, and this is a very intelligent man, part of the World Intellectual Forum, but he was arguing, if I may be so bold as to summarize his argument, is that actually India is the most tolerant, much more so than any Islamic country, and therefore it has the right to defend itself against Muslims who are intolerant. So this is the general thinking among even cultured and intelligent Hindus or Indians, that so they kind of turn a blind eye when the extremist Hindus come together and say, we're going to fight to protect India. There's a sort of emotional, tacit turning away happens. And one says, well, they're the sword arm of Hinduism, you know, yeah, Shiva has a sword too. Because there's this feeling, well, they're the baddies. The Muslims are the baddies. Now, my response to him, were he on the call today, and he'll hopefully come next month rather, is that actually that's, you know, that's the image sold in the media. But actually, there are many Christians in Pakistan, many Christians in Iran. There's a strong Jewish community in Iran. There's interfaith tolerance in Iranian society. There are Zoroastrians. This image of Iran as all, you know, death-dealing fanatics actually isn't historically true, neither then nor now. It's one of the most diverse Islamic cultures. And in Pakistan, there are many diverse, actually, religious communities. And also in Iraq, there was a strong, flourishing Christian community. There's all kinds of Gnostic and esoteric sects, the Mandeans and so on. Syria has a diverse, multicultural society. And so, you know, one of my strategies for peacemaking in the whole Middle East from India, from Iran through to Israel, Palestine, is to say, look, these countries are not monolithic. They have multicultural diversity within them. And if we could all recognize that, instead of demonizing the other, we could sort of internalize plurality. I mean, I'm partly a Muslim, partly Jewish, partly a Kabbalist, partly a Christian, partly a Buddhist, partly a Sufi, partly a Druid. I've internalized plurality. So I can't go to war with anybody without offending myself. And I think this goes back to Rena's point that we're all interconnected. You know, I'm a bit of everything in the Middle East mosaic. I'm not going to go to war with anyone because they're all me. They're all my brothers and sisters. If we can all get that, I got that from sitting in Quaker meetings for many years. And when you go to that inner silence, then I think you can't other successfully anymore because you realize that we're all part of that great silence. But what shocked me about the Hindu article is that I thought the Hindus knew this. I mean, I'm partly a Hindu. I am a yogi. Reading the Upanishads started my spiritual journey. How is it possible to read the Upanishads and then go out and say you're going to kill all the Muslims? I just don't get it. Are they reading a different text to me? You know, any comments here? Have you read the Upanishads, Sean? Do you know the Hindu philosophy?
Oh yeah, yes, certainly I've dipped into it. I wouldn't say I've read it, and again, yeah, like that, and what Priscilla was saying, there is a history in India, but it seems that New York Times article is saying that it's becoming more mainstream, the extremist Hindu intolerance. I don't know if that's the impression you got, Priscilla, or whatever, that it's kind of backed a bit by the government now. We're not in straightforward, but
Yeah.
I will say that my friend Aaron, he critiqued the New York Times specifically. Apparently, this is what he said. He said the New York Times is very anti-Indian at the moment. This was his comment. And that during the coronavirus, it had been publishing very alarmist views about India's going to the dogs. They're all dying on the streets and burning corpses. I don't know if that's true, but there's obviously a perception among Indians that the New York Times is a suspect newspaper printing anti-Indian stuff. Now, you know, I don't know if that's true. I mean, I think a comment about the media, I bet there were 100 meetings all over India for peace. I bet there's Indian, Muslim, Jewish, Christian people meeting like we do for peace on the same day that those extremists are meeting. And what I find a bit annoying is that the media pick up on the negative stories. They print the horrible Hindus swearing a death oath. They don't pick up on the beautiful Hindus, Muslims, Sufis, and Christians swear eternal peace in Bangalore or whatever. you know, I think the media, whether it's the New York Times particularly, I personally read the New York Times for what I thought was objective news reporting. But, you know, I think you can always slant stuff. And I'd love to see, in fact, we could write, couldn't we, as the World Intellectual Forum, write a letter to the New York Times saying, could you cover, please, some of the peace work being done in India between Hindus, Muslims, and Jews to counterbalance that alarmist thing you wrote up? We'll see what they reply, yeah? Would you be willing to co-sign a letter like that? If I draft it and circulate it, I'll give it a go, right? And you know, we'll see if they'll answer. They might answer. So look, we're coming to the end of our meeting. Any other final comments? Let's just go around. Gila, do you want to make a final? Are you still there? Any final comments on what you've been listening to? You'll have to unmute.
I heard a lecture about the role of the media.
Yeah.
And the main point was that we believe that we live in democracy, but basically there's no democracy. It's what we have is the tyranny of the media, and they have their own interests in the things in the agenda and the things that they bring as news. And like that, they create the conflicts or incite them and keep the fire going on. And it's not an objective media as we thought it should have been, would have been, whatever. There's no objective media any longer. That is a media with its own interests, produced produced to us with a cover that it's natural or news, something like this. But they have their own agenda. The New York Times has its own agenda, like other media people have their own agenda. And they are playing with our thoughts, with our emotions. I mean, one has to consider that. And I think what you said, that we should ask for, to write about the good things. If we want to live in a world that is a good world, we would like to hear more about the good things that are happening in this good world, not always on the bad things, and to make them even bigger.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very important. Yes. And just to comment on that, Gila, I think I've told you this story before, but I'll share it again. It's quite interesting. My family, when we were in Montreal, when I was a baby, were friends with Herb Steinhaus, a psychiatrist who he was in the Canadian Army in World War II, and he was taking photographs of Auschwitz and all the rest when it was opened up. And he worked for UNESCO after the war in the Canadian office. And one day, a chap came to his office in Paris. It was in the beginning of UNESCO, with a suitcase full of photographs and documents. And it was a guy called Oskar Schindler. And Herb had never heard of him, didn't know who this guy was. He walked into his office and said, I've got a great story to tell you. I saved hundreds of Jews. I pretended to be a Nazi. This is how I did it. Look, here's the proof. These are the letters of people I saved. And Herb tried to get that story in the press in Europe and America.
And he couldn't.
1947, 48. Not a single newspaper would print the story because they didn't want to know good news.
Exactly.
It was the start of the Cold War. They only wanted stories about how evil the Russians were, or how evil the capitalists were, because Europe had become split into the Cold War in 1948.
Yeah.
They didn't want to hear about a good German rescuing the Jews. It was old news.
Yeah.
And nobody would print it. And it was only years later when Spielberg made the movie Oscar Schindler, they finally went to interview Herb Steinhaus.
Yeah.
in Montreal. He told this story.
Yeah.
So that shows, this is an old struggle. We're trying to
Yeah.
get the good news out. And,
Exactly.
they're not interested. But Sean, any final comments about what we've been discussing?
Yeah, just it reminds me of that book that we had on the course, Peace Studies course, The First Casualty. And that's, in the media is the truth in any conflict. The first casualty is the truth. And even when there isn't a conflict, it seems to be the truth is always a casualty. No, but thanks, just final comments. Thanks, Thomas, for organising the seminars today and looking forward to the one in a month's time. And thanks to the contributors.
Yeah,
Thank
sure. Okay, thank you. And Priscilla,
Thank
final
you.
thoughts.
Oh boy, I have way too many final thoughts here. I appreciate this group so much. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I was out in the Black Hills in South Dakota, which the Black Hills is the spiritual land of the Sioux, and they have resisted taking money from the U.S. government, and insisting that that's their spiritual land. And I've been out there a couple of times for the Satyagraha Institute that it runs there, basically studying nonviolence. And I'm just thinking that resistance to not accept the money, and originally the Black Hills was taken over really because of gold, So anyway, that's one thought that I would like to think about more. But I was also thinking that from a conflict resolution perspective, everything we've been discussing, it's all value conflict, and in value conflict, agreeing to disagree is such an important response. And pluralism, being from New York, I appreciate the pluralism that we have here. We love our differences, and so that is a key, I think, to moving forward, to somehow looking at what we can learn from each other in a pluralistic environment. So thank you again, everybody.
Definitely.
Love this discussion.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so look, thank you again, everyone, for coming, and Happy New Year. This is our last.
Happy New
New
Year.
Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
2021.
Thank you.
We'll
Yeah.
meet again in 2022 and just in January 30th. So look,
Look forward
shalom,
to it.
salam.
Shalom.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Yeah. Ciao.
Ciao.